I do like it. Sounds like he's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah.
Like, I was on pace for another 1,000-yard season. Guys don't do what I've done. I'm ahead of schedule. I'm going to prove doubters wrong. I mean, some of that was left unsaid. But I would say generally the tone of that answer and a lot of the press conference was he is a guy with something to prove, which I like.
Motivated. I agree with that completely. I'm sure he thought he was going to have more suitors, probably more money. And, as a free agent receiver in his 30s, he's very well aware of his stats, and I don't blame him for that at all. He's probably looking around, seeing some of these other receivers and the deals that they signed. He's saying, well, nobody's done this. I mean, he and Mike Evans probably, as far as like consecutive years. And he was on pace, and he also reminded everybody, for some reason, he had a down year in Houston. It's like, no, he got hurt. Like, he was actually doing just fine.
He played 7 or 8 weeks, and he was on pace for 100 catches and 1,000 yards. He knows that.
He does, and that's fine. I think that's fine. Most receivers, I bet, do. Whether they tell you or not, I'm pretty sure the receivers know what their numbers are, especially in a contract year or in a free agency period. They for sure know what their numbers are. Another thing that jumped out to me overall with the Diggs press conference from Friday and some of his, social media stuff since then, there was an exchange about how he had a picture of, Mike Vrabel, and they asked him about it. He's like, yeah, he's like, he used to be a handsome guy. Like, I don't know about it anymore, but he used to be handsome. So it reminded me kind of all the stories we heard about Vrabel, who was the one guy that seemingly kind of poked Bill Belichick. And nobody else did that. Everybody else walked on eggshells around Bill. And Vrabel would give him the business and the stretching line and make fun of what he was wearing. I think you kind of need a guy like that. If you have a whole bunch of guys that are afraid to say stuff, or if you have a whole bunch of guys I think Diggs could be really good. I know some are wondering, I don't know, diva receiver. I don't know if he's got a good relationship with the coach that way. Also, he's been in the league 11 years, which you mentioned a few times too. I think all of that stuff is really important, and that kind of personality could actually work as a real benefit for this team.
And I'll tell you, too, I liked one of his answers on Friday, and we were driving back from Worcester listening to it. I thought WEEI Afternoons did a good job carrying that. I know that wasn't carried everywhere.
I wanted to hear it.
I did as well, and so I thought that was a good listen. And I think he might be good. Trust me, I'm not in on Polk or Baker or those guys, but a guy like that in the room might be good for those guys. Because he gave his answer. It was something like, I was a 5th-round pick in Minnesota, and I didn't get on the field the first 3 weeks, and I thought I was going to get on the field, and the idea is when you get your opportunity, you got to go show out. And look, Jalen Polk got an opportunity and did not show out. Baker, to a lesser degree, when he got his opportunities, didn't do anything with it, but they were more limited for him. There's a chance that Diggs is good for that room. And so I felt pretty good listening to him, but maybe I'm just, falling for the obvious, and it's an introductory press conference.
But that's all we have to base it off of right now.
I'm too easily swayed.
Well, and a lot of time, last year too, remember all of a sudden the receiver coach started catching strays. They were blaming the receiver coach. Yeah. All right, whatever. The position coaches, do have a certain level of importance, but also getting that insight from Steph Diggs, a guy who has done it in the league, and has had a ton of success, all pros. So whether it's certain coverages or just certain whatever, if Jalen Polk or Javon Baker or whoever asks Diggs a question, you might get a pretty good answer. You might get something that does shape how you then go about it, and maybe it does help improve you rather than some of these different position coaches that you had.
So I thought Mike Reese had an interesting note in his Sunday notes yesterday. It was the lead item on Stefon Diggs. He wrote, in 2024, Diggs lined up in the slot 43% of the time, which was a notable increase compared to 27% during his time with the Bills. So still less than 50% of the time in the slot. Mm-hmm. But he was a slot player last year compared to his time in Buffalo. Reese notes the presence of emerging star Nico Collins as a fixture on the outside might have contributed to that. It's true. Their personnel might have forced him inside more. Meanwhile, the slot in New England, which was a staple over the years with Troy Brown, Wes Welker, among others, could use a rebirth. It was expected that Douglas would be the top option in 2025, Pop Douglas, who I guess Stefon Diggs knows, actually. But Diggs' arrival could alter plans at times depending on the other receivers on the field, i.e. Matt Collins on the outside. The Patriots across the last 3 years are 29th in slot receiving yards per game, 62.6, 28th in completion percentage when targeting the slot, 64.7, and 30th in expected points added, EPA, to offense when targeting slot receivers, 32.68, whatever that means. Mm-hmm. Put Diggs in the slot, and those numbers figure to spike. So where does Diggs line up? And if it is in the slot, the guy we felt best about in the receiver room, or at least you felt best about before signing Stefon Diggs, was Pop Douglas.
Right.
If Diggs is a slot guy, what does it mean for a young guy like Pop?
So I think both will probably end up playing all over the place. I think that's probably where Diggs, and he even said it in that clip where it coming back. I can go deep. I can go the medium stuff. You can throw it to me short. Like, I think he's someone that you can probably play anywhere and almost see what you have in the other guys and who you trust more. Because Kayshon Boutte had some decent performances last year, and if you feel good with him on the outside, then that's all right. That's more opportunity for Diggs in the inside. Also, Pop Douglas might not be like they don't have any Welker Edelman.
No,
they don't have one of those guys on the team right now. So it's not the traditional Patriots slot that we're used to, or that Josh McDaniels has even coached a lot of. So I think he's probably going to be all over the place. Like you might see him line up not in the same place twice for like a whole quarter. Like that'd be my guess.
If that's the case, I would like that.
Yeah,
you're probably gonna have a place you primarily line up, but if they're moving around the formation, I think that's good. We didn't get a lot of diva Stefon Diggs at all.
No. I think there's a honeymoon period with most of these guys.
Well, look, and even if you get the diva Stefon Diggs, I personally don't care about that. But I know that's something that's followed him around. Late in the press conference, he did get pressed a little bit on, referencing his numbers and the pace he was on a number of times, which he did harp on a couple of times. We played it for you earlier. I was on pace for 100 catches and 1,000 yards.
It was.
So he gets asked about that at the end, and it was the one time I think you got the diva Steph Diggs a little bit.
You mentioned your statistics and a couple answers. Do you have targets in your mind right now that you look at?
Nah. I mean, it's a new situation. Like in my past situations, you can kind of gauge where I was going to be. But even last year, I said the numbers because that's where I ended up with. Like at the end of the year, we can have a great conversation on where the ball fell and how many numbers I have. But throughout the year, I try not to worry about it. But when the offseason comes around and we making it make sense as far as like number wise, and we talking about money, we talking about this, obviously I'm gonna speak the very language that we all know.
Okay. When we're talking money, my numbers need to be in a certain place.
He should know.
Okay, I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying the one example of that was he was kind of harping on his numbers, and he's like, well, when it's time to talk money, the numbers matter, and I'm going to make sure we have the conversation in the language we all know. I think that was the one aspect of getting a little bit of my numbers need to be in the right spot at the end of the year.
Yeah, at the end of the year. But he also didn't say this year, like, I should be a 1,000-yard guy. Of course I'm a 1,000-yard guy. Like, similar to not putting a timetable on when you're going to be ready, it would make no sense to say what they are. A lot of guys are asked these questions before the year, and a lot of times guys will say, yeah, I do have goals, and I'll keep them to myself. Because you don't want to like publicly say like I'm going to have 10 touchdowns. Then you have 4. Like, hey, remember when you said you wanted 10 touchdowns?
Right.
Like, what happened there?
It's like every time Mayo put out into the atmosphere that we're gonna win 4 games. Yeah, no,
don't say that.
We're gonna burn like anytime you can throw stuff back in your face, we will as the media. So put less out there. That's fair. Yeah.
My guess, I think, would be pretty obvious. Would be games played will be important to him, and then if the games played are in the right spot, back to where he was. He was get out of bed, 100 catch, 1,000-yard guy. That's what he was. It's funny looking at his numbers, especially after he was talking about him. He had 1 year where he was his last year in Minnesota actually was a big yards per catch season. Everything else, and that was like 18 yards a catch. Everything else has been 10, 11, 12, 13. So I think like especially at this stage of his career, this also goes back to like where he's going to line up and everything. He feels more like a 6 catch a game for 65 yards with the occasion like spike. But like on average, 6 for 66. You end the season with somewhere around like 100 yards, 1,000 yards, 100 catches.
No, he's going to have to do it on volume, which I'm okay with.
Yeah, which I am too, which I think Drake May needs, like all that.
But we said this last week. How many times has he had a 100-yard game? It's been like 21 games since his last 100-yard game or something like that, going back to early into his final year in Buffalo. Mm-hmm. One more item on Stefon Diggs. This came out. I don't think it was hard to predict. I know I caught some flack for it in the Twitch chat.
Uh-oh.
I don't think it's hard to predict that all the numbers that came out on Stefon Diggs' contract, the Patriots weren't even going to be close to that. They were trying to trumpet that up, and or Diggs' side was trying to trumpet it up.
Well, it looks good for both.
To make it look like a better deal. Right. Kraft is spending, and Diggs is worth the money. Florio had good details on that. He says the contract has $4 million in 2025 incentives. The Patriots like to structure their deals this way. We highlighted this with Milton Williams. The initial reporting did not align with what Milt Stilt ultimately got. The contract has $4 million in 2025 incentives with $500,000 unlocked at 70, 80, 90, and 100. Okay?
Yep.
So he can get $2 million if he gets to 100 catches in incentives.
Nice.
Same thing with yards. 1,000, 1,100, 1,200, 1,300. So you get 100 catches and 1,300 yards, that's $4 million extra in incentives.
And deserved.
There's also an annual $500,000 Pro Bowl incentive. So you're making the Pro Bowl. There's $500,000.
Is that alternate Pro Bowl too?
Good question. Probably.
If you're like the 10th guy in, you still get it. I'll take it.
Easier for quarterbacks and the like to get in than wide receiver as an alternate.
True.
But that probably still counts. The base value of the deal, Florio writes, is $63.5 million. It is not $69 million.
Damn.
To get to $69 million, Diggs needs to make the Pro Bowl every year and catch 100 passes for 1,300 yards this season in 2025.
I'm high on Diggs. I'm not that high on Diggs.
No, me either.
Yeah.
The guarantee at signing is $16.6 million, not $22.6 million, and not $26 million. I'm sorry. It's $16.6 million. The total guarantee is $22.6 million, not the $26 million, rather.
Right.
Apparently, the initial reports included $3.4 million in per-game roster bonuses. So Diggs gets $3.4 million in per-game roster bonuses where he has to be out there, and I'm skeptical he's going to be ready week one. And Diggs has to earn those. Diggs, who tore his ACL last year, will lose $200,000 for every game he misses. So if he misses 4 or 5 games, you're down $1 million.
Yeah, it's very
on the guarantees
friendly.
in the deal, which were reported as guarantees. It's not worth $23 million a year. It doesn't pay $26 million guaranteed. It has 1 year of security with a team option as to whether he'll continue in 2026 and 2027. So I illustrate that for a couple of reasons. One, I think the Patriots are trying to trumpet it up to make it look like a better deal for them, but it could have been Diggs' side. We're spending. We're in on top flight receivers.
Both help.
And number two, Keith, and maybe this is the more important thing, they don't fully believe in him, and they don't fully believe he's going to be ready week one, and they're protected, which is good business.
Yeah.
They're protected in case he isn't, but I think the more you dig in on this, the more they're not sold he's the same guy.
Well, and even when you heard the initial 26 guaranteed, 69 total, who thought he was going to be here for 3 years? Like, none of these deals, especially when you start signing guys in the 30s, and the guaranteed money versus the reported money are so wildly different. You're like, there's plenty of outs. And then you read into it even further, and like there's even more outs. You're like, I hate the NFL contract. It's so dumb. It's so ridiculous to sort of like figure out every single detail. But no, it does come across as pretty team friendly. I think now, do they want to get credit for, we did spend money at that position, because they haven't really spent money at wide receiver in forever, maybe ever. And so now you're going to be like, well, they did the Steph Diggs one, which people would be like, well, did you see this? Like, did you really spend money at receiver? But it's one of those ones where if he outperforms or performs really well, he'll get paid. Maybe not what he really deserves for a 100-catch, 1,300-yard season, but he'll get more, and the Patriots will be happy to hand that out. But they obviously have covered themselves.
And the main thing is he needs to play. He needs to play 17 games, or else he's costing himself $200,000 every game he misses.
Sign that. So it's easy to say, hey, I'm ahead of schedule, and have your trainer be like, I've never seen anything like this. But if you're willing to sign a deal that is so much tied into like game day bonuses, maybe you do feel you really have a chance.
Well, and look, it'll keep him motivated to be out there week one, which is good. Reese, and we cut this out of the question we had coming back, but Reese asked him prior to that about who else did you visit and who else had interest, and he's like, well, other teams were interested, but this was my only visit.
No visits.
It's like, I wonder how many other teams were really interested at the end of the day. So I still like the signing. He's easily their best receiver. But I think there's a good amount of risk in that you're not sure what he is as a player these days. And the Patriots protected themselves, but they told you they need protection in that deal.